Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel Machining with Joe, a channel where I share with you guys my journey as a beginner machinist. And today's video is a video I sort of wish was around on YouTube at the time of buying my mill, because it's 5 things that you should look out for when buying a second-hand machine. And I've got to admit, this is going to lead nicely on to the next couple of videos that we're going to be doing on the channel, because there's a few little repairs I have to do to the mill, and these are repairs that if I knew about them before buying the mill, I might have spotted them sooner. So that's what today's video is going to be all about. It's going to be sharing with you guys things to look out for if you're buying a second-hand mill, and these might just save you a lot of moolah in the future. So let's head over now to the mill and jump straight into this to look at the first thing you should look out for when buying a second-hand machine. And if you find today's video useful and would like to see more like this, then please hit that subscribe button below and give this video a thumbs up. To start with then, when buying a second-hand machine, I would personally start off by looking at the condition of the table. This will give you a really good idea of what the skills were like of the person owning this machine before you, and it will also sort of give you an idea of the type of life this machine has had. So things to look out for, which are quite apparent on my table, are marks where an end mill or drilling has occurred on the surface of the table. So for me, this wasn't too important because they're only really light marks and they don't affect the overall flatness of the table. Another really good thing to look out for as well when examining a table is you would just want to check all the T-slots are in good condition and working down that there's no apparent cracks or fractures along the T-slots. So the only little bit that mine's got here is, if you can see down here, just where someone's gone along that with an end mill. They've not got down too deep. I'd say that's only about 0.5mm of depth, if that. So this table isn't in too bad a condition, given the age of this mill. If you notice any high spots on your tables caused by the previous owner drilling and using an end mill into the table, there's a really simple thing you can do to get over that and fix that from affecting the quality of work you produce on this table. So I'll quickly show you what you can do to overcome that now. The first thing you want to do then is just clear away all metal chips on the table and make sure there's no other swarf that's going to contaminate this process. So what I then do next is I run a little bit of cutting oil all the way along the table. With sufficient cutting oil on the table, I then get myself a nice flat surface stone and just run along it, going in a circular motion, and this will just clean up any high spots or just any general dirt that you have on the table. And once you're happy, all the high spots are gone and it's at a position where you want to stop, just wipe off all the residue, and I then normally just give it a spray down with a sort of lubricant spray, WD-40, GT85, anything like that. And that table is now good if we want to stick a vise on there. I know it's all level and it's not got any high spots that's going to affect my vise. Once you're satisfied then with the condition of the table on the mill that you're going to be buying, the next thing I would look at is the lead screws. So this is going to be relevant to my mill, but I imagine it's going to be the same on a lot of benchtop mills. So to begin with then, let's look at the Y-axis lead screw on this mill. To gain access to that, if you wind the table all the way back, eventually you'll get to a point where you can see the lead screw. Now you're not going to be able to see a massive amount without taking the lead screw fully out, but what you're just checking for is just to make sure in the centre of the lead screw all the threads look very similar to the threads on the outer part of the lead screw, and that's because it's sort of the centre of the lead screw that does a lot of the work, because on a lot of these benchtop mills, it doesn't really get used that much. So just give it a good thorough examination, make sure there's no cracks on the threads there and they don't look worn or pitted compared to the ones on the outer edge. So happy that my Y-axis is all good. We can then take a look at the X-axis. Now to gain access to the X-axis, all you want to do, for this example, I'm going to move it all the way to the right or your left on the screen. And now with the table all the way over, we can have a look underneath and see what condition the lead screw's in. So I'm pretty happy with the condition of that lead screw. Some of the main things to look out for is just to see if it's been coated in grease or oil over its years, because a dry lead screw is not going to be very good. You want it kind of damp like this is, just because that's going to keep it a lot more lubricated and stop parts wearing out. So have a look all over. Again, we're checking the same things on this lead screw. We're checking all the threads look good, there's no cracking or deformation, and yeah, they're all really good. Happy then that both my lead screws are good on this machine. Another final test you can do, which is going to test a couple of things here, is just wind your table backwards and forwards. Just checking for any tight spots or anything that might indicate something is worn out or starting to seize up. So you can do that on both the X and the Y axes. And this is checking the lead screw as well as checking the ways of the lathe, just to make sure everything seems to be moving together nicely. So on my lathe, that's absolutely on my mill then, that is working a treat. And this leads us on to our next thing that we're going to be checking. We're actually going to be checking the ways on the mill. So this isn't going to be a really in-depth check. All we're checking for is the condition and making sure nothing looks like it's graunching or scraping as it moves backwards and forwards. So again, let's move the Y-axis all the way back, and that will give us a good view of the majority of the ways on this mill. With the saddle of the mill moved all the way back, it gives us good access to the ways. Now I can see that the scraping on the ways still looks like it's in really good condition. Seems to be holding a good amount of oil, and there doesn't seem to be any excessive marks on there which would indicate something is seized up or binding. So I can check that on both sides, and also while I'm there I can just give the gib strip a good little look at, make sure that doesn't look in too bad a condition with no real score marks up the side here. So far then, we've checked the condition of the table, we've checked the condition of the lead screws, and we've also checked the condition of the ways that the X and Y axes move in. So happy that all these are good and you're satisfied that this mill's been looked after. The next area you want to start to check over is the head. So the head is the part of the mill that does all the cutting. It's basically the bit that spins around and takes away material. So to start with then, we're going to look at the spindle. And this is also a really good thing because this will lead us on to the next couple of videos on the channel where I'm going to be replacing the spindle bearings in the head on this mill. So the first sort of thing that I'd be checking when looking at a mill is just check the function of it. Does it move up and down quite freely? Does it lock into place okay? With it locked into place, is there any sort of side movement? So that's all pretty stiff and rigid. Another really important thing to be checking, guys, if you haven't already, making sure that the mill isn't powered up at all. Stick your finger up inside the bore and just check for any score marks or any signs that tools have spun in there. Because if you've got really deep score marks in there, you really want to stay away from that mill unless you intend on changing the spindle itself. So with mine, it's an MT3 taper, which means any score marks in there is going to be insufficient and not be holding my tooling in very well. But I'm happy that all that is good. So this leads me on to the reason that I'm going to be changing the spindle bearings in this, and that's because when you start up the mill, So what should we start on? We'll just put it on this. The bearings down this bottom part sound really noisy, and when doing any cutting I notice a real significant change in noise, which indicates that the bearings in this are on their way out. And if you listen now with it running, you can even hear a sort of change in pitch of noise. So I don't think it's too big a job to change the spindle bearings, but if you've never done a set before, it's probably something you're going to want to stay away from within the first few months of doing any machining. So that's just another little good check you can do to make sure you're not going to come into any problems in the future. So happy that we've checked the bore of the spindle and we've listened out to any weird noises coming from the bearings. The fifth and final thing that I think anyone should be checking if buying a mill, it's more relevant to my one again, is just check all the speeds work on the head. So on mine it's a geared head, it's got 6 different speeds you can choose from: high, low, 1, 2 and 3. And this is something that my mill is suffering from, is on high number 3 it jumps out quite a lot. So I'm going to need to do a bit of in-depth research into that, but it's something, if you're buying a mill guys, look out for, do some checks and make sure you don't fall into a trap like I have, because I've got to do a few repairs to this mill over the next couple of months. The spindle bearing should hopefully be quite a quick and easy one, and as for the jumping out of the third, that's going to be a bit more in-depth. But let's just quickly go over the head now and some bits you can check before actually purchasing one. So when it comes to checking all the speeds, just make sure it goes into all of them nicely. Sometimes you do have to turn the spindle to get it to move over. And also just run through each speed setting and make sure that the spindle actually turns relative to what setting it's on. Another nice little check to do is just check the sight glass in the side here. Mine has got a bit of an oil leak which I'm not too concerned about, but something which I would check on is just see what the quality of that oil looks like in there and make sure there is some in there. So I've done an oil change on mine, so the oil in there I know is pretty good, but if your oil looks really dark in there or it looks empty, then I would definitely recommend looking into how long that's been empty for or how old that oil is, because running a machine dry is really dangerous guys. It can do some serious damage to the insides, so just check that over before making any rash decisions and purchasing a machine. That about sums up the 5 things I would check before buying a milling machine then. And like I said, this is going to lead us on really nicely to a little repair that I'm going to be doing on the mill in the next couple of videos, where we're going to be removing the spindle, replacing the bearings and checking everything over as we go. So I hope that's going to be useful to some of you guys out there. If it is, then please subscribe below and stay tuned for the future videos. Until next week though guys, thank you for watching this video, have a good week and happy machining. See you then guys.